If you're a musician and you have an upcoming performance that you have to get ready for, this episode is for you. Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome. My name is David Lane. This is episode number 163. It is great to be with you once again. So this is the third and final episode where I'm going to be talking about a book that I've read and that I recommend to all of you called Learn Faster, Perform Better by Molly Gebrian. If you missed the two previous episodes, I think that you can listen to these in any order. I've tried to do my best to group these by topics, so the first episode of this series, which was episode number 161, it was a little bit more crammed. It was all about kind of the basics of how the brain works and some things that you can do to just learn music better. Last week, we talked all about how you can use the idea of how the brain learns well and how we set up these synapses to improve your internal rhythm, to improve your internal sense of a steady beat, and then how to speed up music. And again, in case you missed the first two episodes, this book is from the perspective of an author who plays and teaches viola, but also has a background, has studied neurology. So the book is understanding how the brain learns music well, and therefore how you can practice in a way to maximize what the brain does well, and minimize, of course, what it doesn't do well. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about two things. The first is generally how to get better at performing, how to play well. This is something I actually had an episode before I read this book, and I almost wish I could just go back and redo that episode, so you might want to consider this a redo. I think what I said there was good, but what I read in this book really added a whole lot of ideas. Now, you can translate this as how to play well in public, but what I talked about was how do you play better in your lesson? Because I teach a lot of adult students who don't play in public that much, but it bothers them that what they play at home is better than what they do when they play in front of me. So regardless of that situation, if you have to play your music for even one more person, this is really good. But what we're going to go over is especially true if you're preparing to do not just a piece, but you're trying to do multiple pieces, if you're trying to put together an entire recital, an entire concert. And then the other thing we're going to talk about related to this is how to memorize your music. I'm still old school enough that I think you should memorize your music. I enjoy playing music without having to have the sheet music in front of me. Now, I have a lot of colleagues who are classical musicians and they regularly play in ensembles. And it's probably been years, if not decades, since they have been expected to memorize music. Now, I spent about a decade in either band or orchestra, and I understand that, you don't want to just go off the book. You don't want to just go away from the sheet music and find yourself lost, or maybe you're not lost and everyone else is, and you don't have a way to catch back up. But even at the time, I thought, I still want to memorize this music so I can just enjoy it. First of all, I can look up at the conductor more. So anyway, this book had a lot of gems, so let's go ahead and get to them. Let's talk about getting ready for a performance. And once again, this is when you have several pieces in a row that you need to do. So there's three types of practice sessions you should do, and of course you want to engage in all of them, although maybe not in the priority that you think. Those types of practice sessions are blocked, serial, and interleaved. Blocked practice is your massed practice. This is when you play through your entire program in order, from start to finish. So you go to your instrument, you take a bow, and then you sit down if that's something you do for when you play, or you get your stand ready if you're standing up, and then you play through piece number one. Pause. piece number 2, pause, piece number 3, and so on. In other words, you're rehearsing the performance. This is a blocked or a masked practice session. Now, this is the type of practice that most musicians probably do, and they probably think that that's the one that you should do. But according to this book, you should actually do that less. And in the weeks leading up to your performance, you should be engaging more in serial and interleaved practice. So let's talk about serial practice. Before I get to that, why she says that block practice is not good. It's because it leads to what she calls, and I put this in quotes, the illusion of mastery. See, one of the problems is that when you practice everything in order from start to finish, when you rehearse the performance exactly as you expect it to go, well, if you've had any performance experience at all, you realize that things very, very rarely go the way you thought they would. You're playing your music and then you're distracted by someone coughing, or someone is talking to their neighbor, or you see someone get up and go to the bathroom out of the corner of your eye, or you start daydreaming and now you're lost. We could go on and on about the things that could happen, but the point is that things often do happen. So the way around this is to shake it up, to approach things from different ways. So we talked about block practice. Let's talk about serial practice. Serial practice is when you practice for about 5 minutes on each piece in a predictable order. And it doesn't have to be the beginning. It could be we're going to work on the ending of this piece, and then we're going to work on the middle of the next piece. But you use a stopwatch, you practice on a piece for 5 minutes, and then you switch to the next one. You practice for 5 minutes, and then you switch to the next one. Then the advanced version of this approach is the interleaved practice. This is when you work on something for 5 minutes and then you randomly go to something else. Like you might be working on the beginning of your second piece, and then after 5 minutes, you go to the middle of your fifth piece. And then after that, you go to the ending of your third piece. You try to be as random as you can. Now, to illustrate the point of why this works so well, Molly Gebrian talks about the beanbag toss, or the beanbag test, where some researchers took these people and they divided them into 2 groups as a team, and they wanted to see which team could do well tossing a beanbag 3 feet away. Which group could have the highest degree of accuracy? And each group was given a few minutes of practice. However, they were instructed to practice in a certain way. Again, they're practicing to throw the beanbag 3 feet in a test. But group 1 was instructed to alternate between throwing the bag 2 feet and throwing it 4 feet, but never exactly 3 feet. So you're intentionally undershooting the target, and then you're intentionally overshooting the target, and you're going back and forth. And then group 2 was only to practice throwing it exactly 3 feet. No more, no less. Well, that test, that competition was won by group 1, and apparently it wasn't even that close. The group that never practiced throwing it 3 feet, but always 2 or 4, when it mattered, was able to accurately throw it 3 feet much more reliably. And this is because variable practice helps things to stick. It helps our body to understand when we overshoot something, when we undershoot something. That's why we talked about tempo. Practice things slower than you intend, but also practice them faster than you intend. Don't practice at the same tempo every time. Don't practice your pieces in order every time. Now, she does say this, and I would agree with her, that all of this that we just talked about is not recommended for beginners. If you don't have prior experience with performance, you should stick with the predictable, the mass practice. You need to get that experience before you can develop your comfort with variable practice techniques. In this book, she also talks about the importance of mental practice, which is something that I have talked about before, but she talks about it in a way that I hadn't really heard before and hadn't really thought about. The way I have always thought about mental practice is that you physically execute the techniques, such as the fingering pattern of a major scale or a chromatic scale or doing your arpeggios, but you do it at a table or at a desk. You imagine that you're playing your instrument, but you don't actually do it. But the type of mental practice that she talks about, that she said is very effective, is where you physically restrain actually doing any movements at all, but you sit down and you imagine that you are playing your music. But the imagination, this takes a lot of effort. It's not just see a picture in your head of you being at the instrument and playing the music, but allow your arms, your hands, whatever you are using to play your instrument, allow that to be felt. Allow that to pulse. Don't actually move your hands, but allow your brain to conceive of what it feels like in your hands as you're playing that section. Go through it slowly. When you can, go through it quickly. So augmenting your practice with just a few sessions of this type of mental practice really, again, according to this book, helps strengthen. I should put that disclaimer. I'm really fascinated by this book, but I haven't had a chance to test all of these. So if you all try them and you find that they're helpful, or you've given them a good chance and you found that it wasn't, I would appreciate that feedback. Okay, so the final section is that we're going to talk about how to improve your memory when it comes to playing music. So the first thing she mentions is what a lot of people call muscle memory. It's what I've called kinesthetic memory, which is memorizing what things feel like when you play them. She says that the scientific name for this is called procedural memory. So when you're practicing, you just want to put a great emphasis on what things feel like. Try playing things with your eyes closed, where you're not looking at anything and you're just focusing your attention on what is going on with your sense of touch. But there's another type of memory that goes well, and one of the things she talks about is something that I noticed a long time ago, and that there is a strong correlation between people who memorize well and people who play by ear. And that's because you hear the music in your head and you know how to physically play what you're hearing. So in addition to your procedural or kinesthetic memory, you want to work on your auditory memory. Audiation is something that I haven't talked about that much. I did talk about it in one episode. I didn't give it that name. But it's how to improve what you hear in your head, not just ear training or playing by ear, but it's actually hearing the music in your head, especially when you look at a written score. And that's a topic that I'm going to come back to eventually, just as I come up with kind of better ways to explain it and more specific exercises. But her one advice that she says she gives her students to improve your overall skill of auditory memory is to make a habit of once a day, even if it's just for a very few minutes, play something by ear and learn something from memory. We might be talking about play a single phrase by ear and memorize one or two measures. The more you do those two things, the more you strengthen that overall skill. When you're practicing music and you have tough spots, she talks about this, and this is related to something she talked about in the middle of the book, but make a point of letting that be the last thing you practice at night before you wrap up and go to bed, and make it the first thing you practice the following morning after you've slept. One tip she gives is something I was so glad to read because I have done this for a long time. And that is start trying to memorize your piece of music on the first day you begin learning it. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed that. So I'm in my 26th year as a teacher, and there are some things that I teach them in a way because I have always thought that the way I personally do things in some aspects are too unorthodox to encourage my students to do. Not all things, just a few things. But one of those things was I have always started memorizing music as I begin learning it. It is not uncommon at all for me to practice and memorize like the first 4 measures of a piece, and having spent no time at all practicing beyond that. And I've done this only because it's super important to me to memorize everything. But what I've taught students is kind of a by the book approach, and that is that you learn the music really well, you get everything in, and then you take time to memorize it. I apologize to all students I've said that to. I was right the way I've done it, and the way I've done it may not be what people talk about, but it's not unorthodox. It's a way that works. Don't delay memorizing. If it's something, in fact, this is why I don't know what I'm going to be playing in a recital or a concert. I just know that if I'm going to bother to learn it, I don't want to need the book. So I start memorizing right away. So make that a habit. And I bet your memory will improve for when you actually need it. The next advice is something that you've probably heard before, and that is that you should regularly test your memory by starting in different places. The more the merrier. You get these landmarks that you can just find your way to, just in case something happens when you're playing. You don't have to panic and go back all the way to the beginning of a section. How long in advance should you have your piece memorized? Her recommendation is everything should be fully memorized 6 weeks before you actually play it in concert. Sometimes that's not possible, especially if you're asked to learn something in a hurry. But if you've got time, if it's something you've been preparing for a while, get it memorized completely with 6 weeks to spare. And she has 2 more suggestions. So the first of these is, what do you do when you have a memory slip in practice? And she says it'll really be beneficial if you will first try to figure it out. Do your best. Fumble around. You might be wrong on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth attempts, but do your best to just try to figure it out. Resist that urge to go open up the score to see what it really is. But after you've done that, you can then open the score to see how close to being correct you were. But that act of laboring through it, you've had a memory slip and let's figure it out. That really helps train your brain. And then the last thing that she says is that you really need to shoot for 10 practice performances of your entire program from memory before you actually play it in public. So that's going to wrap up not only today's episode, but also this series. If you read the book, let me know your thoughts. This is one I just read it about a month ago, and I am looking forward to adding more and more of these suggestions to my own practice and see how that goes. But I would love it if you would do the same. If you need to get in touch with me, you can always comment on the video if you're watching on YouTube. You can go to my website, davidlanemusic.com, and leave a message in the contact form that's on the homepage. Or you can send me a direct message on Instagram or TikTok. My handles are in the description, but they're both at David Lane Music. So again, that's going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with you again next week.